During dinner, my mom slipped me a folded note under the table. It said only this: "Pretend you feel sick. Leave now." My stomach dropped. I looked at her, hoping it was some kind of mistake, but she gave me the slightest nod. I felt my chest tighten as I pushed my chair back. 5 minutes later, someone at the table collapsed. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Emily Lawson. I was 22, home from college for the weekend when this happened. That night, we were having dinner at my Uncle Peter's house. It was meant to be a warm family gathering. My dad, Mark, was telling one of his dry jokes. My cousins were laughing too loudly at things that weren't even funny. And my mom, Rebecca, sat across from me, smiling, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the room the way she always did when something fell off. Dinner started like any other. Glasses clinked, plates were passed around, and my uncle kept bragging about the roast. At the far end of the table sat Cynthia, an old family friend who had recently reconnected with my uncle. She was cheerful, even pushy, constantly insisting everyone try the dish she brought. I noticed how she watched people's reactions closely, as though she cared too much about whether we liked it. I didn't think much of it until my mom leaned forward and asked about my classes, her tone casual, but her eyes locked on mine. She was trying to act normal, but I could sense tension in her voice. Then, without warning, she reached under the table and slipped me a folded piece of paper. I opened it quickly and read the words that made my blood run cold. "Pretend you feel sick. Leave now." I looked up confused, but she gave me a firm nod. I felt panic rising, but I trusted her. I forced myself to push my chair back slowly, clutching my stomach as if I didn't feel well.
Everyone looked at me, but I managed to mutter something about needing fresh air. My mom didn't move. She just kept her steady gaze on me as if telling me, "Do what I say, don't question it." At that moment, I didn't know if she was saving me from embarrassment or from something much darker. When I stepped out of the dining room, the air in the hallway felt cooler, sharper, as if the walls themselves knew something was wrong. I leaned against the wall, clutching my stomach for show in case anyone was watching. But inside, I was trembling. My mom's note echoed in my mind. "Pretend you feel sick. Leave now." She hadn't written anything more. No explanation, no clue, just those words. I ducked into the kitchen, trying to study my breathing. The hum of the refrigerator and the clatter of dishes in the sink felt strangely loud. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning everything else out. I wanted to turn back and ask her what she meant, but the look in her eyes stopped me. My mom wasn't someone who panicked easily. If she told me to leave, then something was seriously wrong. From the kitchen doorway, I could hear the muffled sounds of conversation from the dining room, forks against plates, bursts of laughter, the scrape of chairs. Everything seemed normal, but my instincts told me otherwise. I kept thinking about the way Cynthia had insisted everyone try her dish. She had smiled too brightly, pushed the serving bowl too often toward people who hadn't taken any yet. At first, I thought she was just eager to show off, but now I wasn't so sure. I pulled out my phone and texted my mom under the table, where I sat on a stool in the kitchen. "What's happening? Why did you want me to leave?" My thumb hovered over the screen, waiting for her reply. The seconds dragged on. No answer. My anxiety spiked. I peeked into the hallway again. I could see my father's silhouette through the doorway, hear his voice telling a story about one of his clients. He sounded relaxed, unaware of the tension brewing at the table. My uncle laughed at the right moments, and my cousins joked with each other. No one else seemed to sense anything. Only my mom. Finally, my phone buzzed. "Stay out of sight." "Trust me," that was all she wrote. My stomach turned cold. She wasn't explaining, just reinforcing her warning. I gripped the phone tightly, my hands damp with sweat. The sound of clinking glasses reached me again. I heard Cynthia's cheerful voice. "Come on, everyone. Don't be shy. You have to taste it while it's still warm." My skin prickled. Why was she so insistent?
I debated running back in and blurting out everything, telling my dad not to eat, warning my cousins, demanding answers from Cynthia. But then I remembered the way my mom's eyes had locked on mine, fierce and unblinking. She had made me leave for a reason. If I went back, I could ruin whatever plan she had to keep me safe. So I waited, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. Every sound from the dining room made me flinch. A burst of laughter would ease my nerves for a moment, only to be replaced by another wave of dread when the room went quiet again. Then came the cough. At first it was faint, just a rough clearing of the throat. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. A second cough followed, harsher this time, then the scrape of a chair against the floor. Voices rose, overlapping, confused. Someone asked if everything was all right. Another voice sounded strange. Panic. I rushed to the edge of the doorway, peering around the corner. My cousin Jacob was clutching his chest, his face pale, his fork clattering to the floor. My father jumped to his side, shouting for water. The room erupted into chaos. Chairs toppled, people shouted, someone screamed. I wanted to run in, but my mother caught my eye across the room. She didn't speak. She didn't even move from her seat. She just shook her head slightly, her message clear. Stay back. My legs trembled as I forced myself to obey. Cynthia's voice cut through the noise, high-pitched and desperate. It must be an allergy. He must be allergic to something in the dish, but her face was too tight, her eyes starting too quickly around the room. She looked less like someone shocked and more like someone trying to cover their tracks. My uncle was already calling 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what was happening. My dad knelt beside Jacob, trying to keep him conscious. And in the middle of the chaos, my mom sat calm and steady, her eyes never leaving Cynthia. Standing in the kitchen doorway, I realized the truth. My mom had seen this coming. She had known there was something wrong with that food. She had pulled me out before I had a chance to take a bite. And now, as my cousin gasped for air, I understood the terrifying weight of the note she had slipped me. It wasn't just a warning. It was a lifeline. The dining room was chaos. My cousin Jacob was slumped against the table, struggling for breath while my father tried to support him, and my uncle shouted into the phone for an ambulance. Plates clattered, glasses spilled, and people scrambled to help. But through it all, my mother sat perfectly still. Her face was calm, her posture rigid, her eyes locked on Cynthia. I stayed frozen in the kitchen doorway, torn between the urge to run to Jacob and the need to obey my mom's warning. My legs trembled with indecision. Every fiber of my being told me to help, to at least be near my family. But something about my mother's steady gaze held me in place. She had seen this coming. She had pulled me out for a reason. If I stepped in now, I might ruin whatever plan she had. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from her. Stay put. Do not eat or drink anything. Trust me, that was all I needed. I realized this wasn't just about pretending to be sick. My mom believed someone at the table had tried to harm us. The collapse wasn't an accident, and she had chosen to protect me before anyone else. The thought sent chills down my spine. I crouched lower in the doorway, trying to stay out of sight while still keeping my eyes on the room. Cynthia was standing now, wringing her hands dramatically, her voice high and panic. It has to be an allergy. I swear I don't know what happened. Her words sounded frantic, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted from my mother to the dish she had brought, then back again. She was watching too closely, too calculatingly for someone who claimed to be innocent. My uncle waved his free hand for silence while he stayed on the phone with the dispatcher. My dad kept shouting Jacob's name, trying to keep him awake. My cousins huddled near the far wall, whispering in fear. And still, my mother's gaze never wavered. She didn't look at Jacob. She didn't look at the chaos. She looked at Cynthia as though the rest of the scene didn't exist. I began to understand. My mother was playing a dangerous game. If she accused Cynthia outright in the middle of the panic, people might dismiss it as hysteria. But if she stayed calm, if she kept her composure, she could watch Cynthia reveal herself. My mom wasn't just protecting me. She was gathering proof. I pulled out my phone again and typed quickly. Mom, what do you want me to do? Seconds later, her reply came. Stay quiet. Watch everything. You'll see. So I did. I forced myself to stay back to let the adults handle the emergency. My heart for Jacob as he gasped and wheezed, but paramedics were already on their way. What I could do now was trust my mother's instincts. The same instincts that had pulled me from that table. Minutes dragged like hours. Jacob's breathing slowed but stabilized slightly as my father kept him upright. The room had quieted just enough for everyone to hear Cynthia's voice again. She stepped forward, her words spilling too fast. I made that dish 100 times before. It never caused anything like this. Maybe he has a rare allergy. Maybe it was something else he ate earlier. It's not my fault. Her voice cracked, but it didn't sound like fear for Jacob. It sounded like fear of being blamed. That distinction was clear as day, and I knew my mother saw it too. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost cold. Funny, she said, eyes still locked on Cynthia. You haven't touched a single bite of your own dish tonight. The room went silent. Every head turned toward Cynthia, whose hands froze mid-gesture. For the first time that night, she lost her composure. Her eyes flicked toward the bowl in the center of the table, then back to my mom. My uncle frowned, confusion written across his face. What are you talking about, Rebecca? She's been pushing it on everyone. My mom replied evenly, but not once did she eat any herself. Watch her. She's sweating. She's nervous. Ask her why. I felt my breath catch. My mother had just shifted the entire room's focus. No longer was it just about Jacob collapsing. Now everyone was staring at Cynthia. Cynthia stammered, her voice faltering. That's ridiculous. I ate earlier. I wasn't hungry. But her excuse only deepened the suspicion. My uncle's eyes narrowed. My father, still holding Jacob, glanced sharply at her. Even my cousin seemed to realize what was happening. The mood of the room had changed from panic to suspicion, and my mom had orchestrated it with one perfectly timed sentence. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding as the weight of the moment settled over the table. I knew then that my mother's warning had been about far more than me pretending to be sick. She had seen danger where no one else had, and now she was pulling the truth into the light. And as Cynthia shifted under the piercing stares of the family, I realized something chilling. This dinner wasn't over yet. The collapse was only the beginning. The room went still after my mother spoke. Her words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and undeniable. Everyone turned toward Cynthia, who stood frozen near the end of the table. For the first time that evening, the smile she had plastered across her face was gone. Her eyes darted from person to person, as if searching for an escape. I could feel my own pulse hammering in my ears. Jacob was still slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow, but steadier now as my father held him upright. My uncle's phone still pressed his ear, looked torn between, finishing the call with the dispatcher and demanding answers from Cynthia. The cousins whispered nervously, watching the scene unfold like an audience to a play they didn't understand. Cynthia finally tried to laugh, a brittle sound that fooled no one. Rebecca, really? You think I poisoned my own dish? That's insane. Her voice shook with forced confidence, but my mother didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Cynthia and said, Then prove me wrong. Take a bite. The room erupted with gasps. My uncle's jaw dropped. My father looked at Cynthia sharply. Even I, standing in the kitchen doorway, felt the weight of those words. It was a challenge that cut through all the excuses. If the dish was safe, there was nothing to fear. Cynthia's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her hands trembling at her sides. I already told you I'm not hungry. I ate before I came. My mom leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. You've pushed that dish on everyone tonight. You insisted over and over that we all try it, and yet you've never touched a single spoonful. That doesn't sound like someone who's proud of their cooking. That sounds like someone who knew exactly what was in it. Cynthia's lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes flicked toward the bowl in the center of the table, the half-empty dish she had carried in with so much fanfare. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my uncle lowered his phone, his voice shaking with rage. "Cynthia, what did you do?" The questions seemed to break her. Her hands flew up as if to ward off the accusations. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she burst out, her voice rising. The words silenced the room even more effectively than my mother's challenge had. "What do you mean?" my father demanded. His arm tightened protectively around Jacob. Cynthia's eyes brimmed with tears, but there was no softness in her face. It was anger, bitterness that twisted her features. "Do you think your family is perfect? Do you think you can just treat people however you want and expect them to keep smiling? Your brother ruined my life years ago. I lost everything because of him. Tonight was supposed to be justice." My uncle recoiled, his voice cracking. "Justice by poisoning my family, by nearly killing my nephew." Her chest heaved, and for the first time, she looked less like the cheerful family friend she pretended to be, and more like a stranger with a dangerous grudge. "I only meant to scare you," she said weakly. "I didn't expect it to be this bad," but no one believed her anymore. The cousins pressed closer to the wall. My father's face hardened with fury, and my mother, still calm and composed, said the words that sealed everything. "You were willing to put every person at this table in danger just to settle a score. You didn't care who got hurt." The wail of sirens grew louder outside, filling the silence that followed. Moments later, paramedics rushed into the room, moving straight to Jacob. Behind them, 2 police officers entered, summoned by the dispatcher when my uncle had described the situation. Everything happened quickly after that. The paramedics worked on stabilizing Jacob, checking his vitals, preparing to rush him to the hospital. The officers questioned everyone briefly, but it didn't take long for eyes to turn toward Cynthia. She was shaking, her excuses falling apart with every passing second. When the officers asked her directly to explain why she hadn't eaten her own food, she broke down completely. "It was just a mistake," she sobbed, her voice high and frantic. "I didn't mean to kill anyone. I only wanted them to suffer a little, to feel what I felt." Her confession was enough. The officers moved swiftly, reading her rights as they let her out of the dining room in handcuffs. The sight of her being taken away left the room in stunned silence. I stepped forward from the kitchen, finally able to move, my legs weak beneath me. My mom turned toward me, her expression softening as she reached out. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. I nodded, though my throat was tight. "You knew," I whispered. "You saw it before anyone else." She pulled me into her arms, holding me close as the paramedics wheeled Jacob out. "Sometimes you don't need proof to know when something's wrong," she said. "You just listen to your gut, and when it comes to protecting you, I will always trust mine." I clung to her, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. The dinner that was supposed to be a simple family gathering had turned into something darker than I could have imagined. And as the flashing red and blue lights filled the night outside, I realized how close I had come to sitting at that table when the food was passed around. My mother's note had saved me. Her instincts had saved us all. The hours that followed felt like an endless blur. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars spilled across my uncle's front yard, while neighbors gathered outside, whispering in shock. Inside, the dining room that had once been filled with laughter and clinking glasses was now a crime scene. Paramedics had already rushed Jacob to the hospital, assuring us he was stable, but needed close monitoring. My uncle stood pale and trembling in the corner, replaying every word Cynthia had confessed. I sat quietly on the couch, my mom's arm wrapped around my shoulders. My father paced the hallway, his face hard and unreadable. Every so often he would stop, glance toward the kitchen where the police collected evidence from Cynthia's dish, then mutter under his breath in disbelief. My cousins huddled together, whispering about how close we all had come to eating the poisoned food. The air was thick with fear, relief, and the heavy truth that none of us would ever forget that night. When the officers finally left with the evidence, the house was eerily quiet. My uncle broke down, tears streaming as he whispered, "She was my friend. I trusted her. I never thought."
His voice cracked and he couldn't finish the sentence. Seeing him like that, so broken, so betrayed, made my chest ache. Cynthia hadn't just targeted our family, she had shattered his sense of safety in his own home. Later that night, when most of the family had gone home, and only my parents and I remained, I asked my mom the question that had been burning inside me since she slipped me that note. "How did you know?" My voice was small, almost childlike, but I needed the answer. She looked at me, her eyes tired but steady. "Mothers notice things," she said softly. The way she kept pushing her dish, how she didn't eat any herself, how nervous she was every time someone took a bite. Everyone else thought she was just being enthusiastic, but I knew something was wrong. I couldn't explain it in the moment. I just had to act. Her words sank deep into me. I realized then how much of my life had been shaped by her quiet strength, her ability to see what others couldn't. She had saved me with nothing more than a note and a look. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to change everything. The next day, when we visited Jacob in the hospital, he managed a weak smile. "Guess I took one for the team," he joked, though his voice was hoarse-row, but behind his humor, I could see the fear in his eyes. We all could. He had been the one to suffer the most directly, and it would take time for him to feel safe again. For me, the memory of that night became a turning point. I thought back to how close I had been to taking a bite from Cynthia's dish, how casually I might have laughed off my mom's note if I hadn't seen the urgency in her eyes. I thought about how fragile life really is, how quickly an ordinary dinner can become a nightmare. But more than anything, I thought about trust. Trusting my mother saved me. Trusting her instincts, even when I didn't understand them, kept me alive. It taught me that sometimes we don't need all the answers in the moment. Sometimes survival means listening to the people who love us most, even when their warning sounds strange or inconvenient. I also learned something about appearances. Cynthia had come into our home with a smile, acting like a friend. She laughed. She shared stories. She pretended to belong, but underneath she carried bitterness and hatred. That night reminded me that evil doesn't always look like a villain. Sometimes it looks like someone you think you can trust. In the weeks after, my uncle struggled with guilt, blaming himself for inviting her. But my mom reminded him gently, "It's not your fault for showing kindness. It's her fault for abusing it." Those words stuck with me. They helped me understand that we can't live our lives in constant suspicion, but we also can't ignore our instincts when something feels wrong. Looking back now, I see that dinner not only as the night my cousin nearly lost his life, but also as the night my mom showed me just how powerful love and intuition can be. She didn't need evidence or proof. She just knew. And because I trusted her, I'm here to tell the story. That night changed the way I see my mom. She isn't just my mother. She is my protector, my guide, and the reason I walked away safe. If she hadn't acted when she did, I might have been the one on the floor. And that's a lesson I'll carry forever. Sometimes the smallest warnings can make the biggest difference. Before you go, subscribe to Justice Drama Stories, because the next story might make you question the people closest to you. Betrayal, secrets, revenge, and justice, every single week.